I stopped fixing her mistakes at work after being blamed for years. She noticed when HR called her in. The conference room had that specific smell of recycled air and fear that all HR meetings share. I sat across from Linda Mercer, our department head, and Gregory Ashton, the HR director I'd only seen in company-wide emails. Between us sat 3 manila folders, each one thick enough to make my stomach turn. What made my hands start shaking wasn't the folders themselves. It was the name typed on the tab of the thickest one. My name. Not hers. Mine. "We need to discuss some serious performance issues," Gregory said, flipping open the first folder. I watched him scan the page, his expression carefully neutral in that way, HR people perfect over years of delivering bad news. "According to these reports, you've been responsible for multiple project delays, cost overruns, and client complaints over the past 18 months. I didn't say anything. Couldn't, really. My throat had gone completely dry. He continued reading from what I recognized as incident reports, each one detailing a catastrophic mistake I supposedly made. The Whitmore account where specifications were entered wrong, costing us $32,000 in materials. The Jensen project that shipped 3 weeks late because someone forgot to order components. The Riverside presentation where the client walked out because the numbers didn't match their brief. I knew every single one of those incidents. I'd fixed every single one of them, and I'd taken the blame for exactly none of them because I hadn't made the mistakes in the first place. "Do you have anything to say?" Linda asked. Her voice carried that edge of disappointment I'd heard too many times. For the first time in 3 years, I looked her directly in the eye and said something I should have said approximately 900 days earlier. Yes, none of that was me. Gregory's pen stopped moving. Linda's expression shifted from disappointment to something harder to read. I pulled out my phone, opened a folder I'd been building for the past 6 weeks, and set it on the table between us. "I can prove it," I said. Every single word. The silence that followed lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to find out if the rope would hold. Then Gregory reached for my phone, and everything I'd been carrying for 3 years finally started to shift. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I became Rebecca Lawson's personal safety net. It was my 4th week at Meridian Systems, a mid-sized engineering consulting firm that handled everything from building automation to industrial process control. I'd been hired as a project coordinator, the person who keeps all the moving parts of complex installations synchronized. Rebecca had been there for 6 years, held the same title, and had the kind of easy confidence that made clients trust her immediately. We shared an office, a situation I initially thought would be ideal. She knew the systems, the clients, the internal processes. I was the new guy who needed guidance. That first time, it seemed innocent enough. She'd transposed 2 numbers in a materials order for the Hastings Medical Center project. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to delay delivery by a few days. I noticed it during a routine check, fixed it with a quick call to the supplier, and mentioned it to her in passing. "Oh my God, thank you," she'd said, her hand on my arm, genuine relief flooding her face. "I've been so swamped. You're a lifesaver." It felt good, being helpful, being the person who caught errors, who kept things running smoothly. I didn't realize I was building a cage. The pattern established itself slowly, like water carving stone. A missed deadline here, a forgotten client callback there, specifications entered wrong in the system. Small things, mostly. Things I could fix with an extra hour of work, a strategic phone call, a quick correction in the database before anyone noticed. Rebecca always thanked me profusely. Sometimes she brought coffee. Once she gave me a gift card to that Italian place downtown. I told myself I was being a good colleague, a team player. The company valued collaboration, right? Our manager at the time, David Thornton, had a hands-off approach that bordered on neglect. As long as projects got delivered and clients stayed happy, he didn't ask questions about the process, which meant he never noticed that I was working 50-hour weeks while Rebecca left at 5 every evening. He never noticed that I knew the details of her projects better than she did, and he definitely never noticed when I started staying late not to get ahead, but just to check her work before it went out the door. The first time I got blamed for one of her mistakes, I actually thought it was funny. A client called, furious about receiving the wrong equipment for their server room upgrade. Thornton walked past my desk and without breaking stride said, "Fix whatever you screwed up with Sterling Tech. Client's pissed." I opened my mouth to explain it wasn't my project, but he was already gone. I looked over at Rebecca's desk. She was on a personal call, laughing about weekend plans, completely unaware that I was about to spend my lunch break cleaning up an error she'd made in the equipment specifications. I fixed it. Of course I fixed it. Pulled the correct specs, called Sterling Tech personally, got the right equipment expedited, and smoothed everything over with a discount David approved without question. The client was happy. The project got back on track. And somewhere in the Meridian Systems collective consciousness, it became established fact that I had messed up the Sterling Tech order. Rebecca sent me a private message that afternoon. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. Literally a lifesaver. Drinks on me Friday?" I went. We laughed about office politics and difficult clients. She never mentioned that I'd saved her from what could have been a career-damaging mistake. It didn't seem important at the time. 3 months later, the pattern had become so normalized that I didn't even question it anymore. I'd review her project files every Thursday afternoon, the same way I checked my email or updated my calendar. It was just part of my routine. Catch errors, fix them quietly, keep the machine running. I rationalized it a dozen different ways. She was going through a divorce, she'd mentioned once. She had a sick parent she was caring for. She was juggling a lot. Everyone needs help sometimes, right? The truth I wasn't ready to face was simpler and uglier. Rebecca had learned that mistakes didn't have consequences for her, because I would absorb them. The Whitmore disaster should have been my wake-up call. Should have been the moment I stepped back and let natural consequences happen. Whitmore Industrial was our biggest client, a manufacturing company that needed a complete overhaul of their facility management systems. $48,000 project, 6-month timeline, 0 room for error. They'd specifically requested Rebecca because she'd handled their smaller projects before. She'd called me at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, her voice tight with stress I'd learned to recognize. "I need you to look at something," she said. "The Whitmore specs. Something feels off, but I can't figure out what." I pulled up the files from home, started cross-referencing the client's requirements against what she'd entered into our ordering system. My stomach dropped when I found it. She'd used the wrong building codes, wrong jurisdiction, wrong specifications, wrong everything. If those materials got ordered and installed, they'd fail inspection immediately. Whitmore would be liable for tens of thousands in corrections, and Meridian would likely lose the client forever. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "did you verify which code jurisdiction Whitmore's facility falls under?" Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "I thought it was the same as their headquarters." "Their headquarters is in a different county. Different building codes entirely." More silence. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel the panic through the phone. "Can you fix it?" she finally asked. Not, "How do we fix it?" or "What should I do?" but "Can you fix it?" Because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. I should have said no. Should have told her to call our manager, to own the mistake, to do the work of correcting it herself. Instead, I spent 4 hours rebuilding the entire specification package, cross-referencing the correct codes, recalculating materials, and updating the order system. I sent it to her at 1 a.m. with a detailed explanation of what I'd changed and why. She replied at 8 a.m. the next morning, "You're amazing. Seriously, I owe you one." The following week, when the Whitmore order went through under budget and ahead of schedule, David Thornton publicly praised Rebecca in our team meeting for her attention to detail and thorough preparation. She smiled, accepted the compliment, and never once mentioned that I'd rebuilt the entire project from scratch. I sat there, watching her collect credit for my all-nighter, and felt something shift in my chest. Not anger yet. Something quieter and more dangerous. The first seed of resentment. The Jensen project was where things started cracking in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. Jensen Manufacturing needed a process control system upgrade, critical timeline, penalty clauses in the contract if we missed deadlines. Rebecca was point on it. I was technically backup, though by that point backup meant I was doing the actual work while she handled client calls and status meetings. I'd flagged 3 times in our shared project tracker that we needed to order a specific controller module. Delivery time was 3 weeks, and we needed it for the installation date we'd promised Jensen. Rebecca had acknowledged the flags each time. "On it," she'd written. "We'll order today." The controller never got ordered. I found out 5 days before the installation when I did my routine check of outstanding materials. The module wasn't just delayed, it had never been ordered at all. I walked to Rebecca's desk, my hands already shaking with an anger I'd been suppressing for months. "The Jensen controller," I said, keeping my voice level. "Tell me you ordered it." She looked up from her phone, confused. "The what?" "The Jensen project. The controller module. The one I flagged 3 weeks ago. And again, 2 weeks ago. And again, last week." I watched recognition dawn on her face, followed immediately by defensive panic. "I thought you were handling materials," she said. "I flagged it in the tracker. You acknowledged it. 3 times. She clicked through her emails, her face going pale. "Oh no. Oh God. I must have gotten mixed up with the Riverside materials. I thought..." She trailed off, and I could see her brain working, trying to find an angle that made this not her fault. "Can we overnight it?" I pulled up the supplier's website on my phone, showed her the screen. 3-week minimum on this model. It's specialized. There are exactly 2 manufacturers in North America, and both require fabrication time. Her hand went to her mouth. The Jensen contract had penalty clauses. $5,000 per day for delays past the agreed installation date. We were looking at minimum $15,000 in penalties, plus whatever damage to our reputation. "What do we do?" she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something in me finally snapped. Not into anger, but into clarity. "We? There is no we. You tell David what happened. You call Jensen and explain the delay. You handle the consequences." Her eyes went wide. "I can't. This will destroy my credibility with David, with Jensen. Please. You always know how to fix these things. There has to be a way." There was a way. There was always a way. I'd built a career on finding ways to solve other people's problems. This time, I walked back to my desk without another word. I updated my personal notes with the exact timestamp of our conversation, the email trail of my flags, and Rebecca's acknowledgments. Then I went back to my own projects and waited for the explosion. It came the next morning. David called an emergency meeting. Rebecca, myself, and 2 people from finance. "Someone want to explain to me how we're about to miss the Jensen deadline?" David asked, his voice carrying the kind of cold fury that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Rebecca jumped in before I could speak. "There was a miscommunication about materials ordering. The controller module didn't get ordered in time." David's eyes cut to me. "You're materials coordinator for Jensen." "I'm backup coordinator," I corrected. "Rebecca is project lead. I flagged the controller as critical 3 separate times in the tracker. She acknowledged each flag." I pulled up the tracker on the conference room screen, showed the time-stamped flags, her responses, all of it documented. David's expression shifted as he read through the trail. Rebecca's face had gone from pale to red. "I thought," she started, but David held up a hand. "Not now. We'll discuss this later. Right now, I need solutions. Can we salvage this?" I already had one. I'd spent half the night researching it, wargaming the possibilities even as I told myself I was done covering for her. "There's a specialty supplier in Chicago that keeps limited stock of compatible modules," I said. "Not the exact model we specified, but functionally equivalent. We'd need engineering to approve the substitution, expedite shipping, and adjust the installation plan. It'll work, but it won't be cheap." David nodded. "Make it happen. I don't care about the cost. I care about keeping Jensen happy." I made it happen. Spent my own money on overnight shipping because the purchase order would take too long. Called in a favor with an engineer I knew from a previous job who could do the equivalency approval off hours. Reworked the installation plan at midnight to accommodate the different mounting specifications of the substitute module. The Jensen project installed on time. The client was happy. The company avoided $15,000 in penalties. And in the post-project review meeting, David started with, "This could have been catastrophic. We need to tighten up our materials tracking procedures." He looked directly at me when he said it, not at Rebecca, at me. Because somewhere in the translation of events, the narrative had shifted. Rebecca had successfully framed it as a systems failure, a communication breakdown, something that happened to both of us rather than something she'd caused. I sat there, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached, and realized I'd made everything worse by fixing it. If I'd let the project fail, the blame trail would have been clear and undeniable. Instead, I'd once again absorbed the consequences of someone else's incompetence, and once again, I'd received nothing but more scrutiny for my trouble. The breaking point came 6 weeks later, though I didn't recognize it immediately. The Riverside presentation was supposed to be routine. Quarterly business review with one of our stable, long-term clients. Rebecca was presenting our recommendations for their next phase of expansion. I'd prepared all the data, the cost analyses, the technical specifications. She'd built the slide deck and was delivering the presentation. I wasn't even supposed to be in the meeting, but our new manager, Linda Mercer, who'd replaced David when he moved to the corporate office, asked me to sit in. "Good experience," she said. "See how the client-facing side works." I should have said no. The meeting started well. Rebecca had always been good at presentations, at selling ideas, at making clients feel confident. Then we hit slide 9, the cost breakdown for the proposed expansion. The client's CFO, a sharp woman named Patricia Thornhill, stopped Rebecca mid-sentence. "These numbers don't match what you sent us last week." Rebecca blinked. "I'm sorry?" Patricia pulled out a printed email, slid it across the table. "Your preliminary estimate. You quoted $320,000 for the infrastructure upgrade. This presentation shows $480,000. That's a 50% increase." I felt my stomach drop before Rebecca even opened her mouth. I knew those numbers. I'd calculated them myself, sent them to Rebecca with detailed breakdowns and clearly labeled files. One was for the basic upgrade. One was for the premium package with additional features. She'd sent the client the wrong estimate. "There must be a miscommunication," Rebecca started, her voice smooth, controlled. "Let me check my files." But Patricia wasn't backing down. "No miscommunication. You sent this, your email, your signature, and now you're presenting completely different numbers. Which one is accurate?" Rebecca looked at me, not subtly, not discreetly, but obvious enough that everyone in the room noticed. That look said everything. "Fix this. Save me. You always do." I looked back at her and felt something fundamental shift in my chest. The weight I'd been carrying for 3 years, the responsibility for her mistakes, the endless cycle of covering and fixing and absorbing blame. I was done. "I'd have to review the project files," I said slowly, directing my words to Patricia, not Rebecca. "The numbers I calculated were based on 2 different scope packages. It's possible the wrong estimate was sent to you initially." The word wrong hung in the air like an accusation. Rebecca's eyes flashed at me, a look I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with anger mixed with betrayal. But I'd passed some invisible point of no return. I wasn't going to lie. Not this time. The meeting ended badly. Patricia said they needed to review everything, reassess whether Meridian was the right partner going forward. Linda asked Rebecca and me to stay behind after the client left. "What?" Linda said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Just happened?" Rebecca launched into an explanation about file confusion, about how she'd been juggling multiple projects, about systems and processes and everything except the simple truth. She'd screwed up and sent the wrong numbers. The estimates were clearly labeled, I said, cutting through her excuses. Basic package and premium package. Different scopes, different costs. Both sent to you on the same day with a detailed email explaining which was which. Linda's eyes moved between us. So to be clear, you sent her the correct information, and she sent the client the wrong estimate? I nodded. Rebecca's face went red. That's not... It was an honest mistake. Anyone could have... But you made it, I interrupted. And when the client called you on it in the meeting, you looked at me to fix it, like you always do. The words were out before I could stop them. 3 years of resentment compressed into one sentence. The silence that followed was absolute. Linda looked at me with new attention, the kind that sees patterns instead of individual incidents. What do you mean? Like you always do. And there it was. The moment I could have backed down, smoothed things over, kept the peace. Instead, I started talking. I told her about the Whitmore specifications, the Jensen controller, the Sterling tech order, every major save, every late night, every instance of Rebecca's mistake becoming my emergency. I didn't raise my voice, didn't editorialize, just laid out facts, dates, project names. Rebecca tried to interrupt twice. Linda held up a hand, kept her attention on me. Do you have documentation of any of this? She asked when I finished. All of it, I said. Email trails, project tracker notes, time-stamped file corrections, everything. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. He's trying to sabotage me because I don't know why. Maybe he's bitter that I get better client feedback, or that I've been here longer, or... Sit down, Linda said quietly. Rebecca sat. Linda looked at me for a long moment. Send me everything, every piece of documentation you have, tonight. I nodded. She dismissed us both. I spent that evening compiling 3 years of evidence. Email threads where I'd corrected her errors. Project tracker screenshots showing my flags and her acknowledgements. File metadata proving I'd rebuilt entire specifications she'd botched. Text messages where she'd thanked me for saving her. Calendar entries showing the hours I'd worked cleaning up her mistakes. By the time I finished, I had a 42-page document with appendices. I sent it to Linda at 11 p.m., then sat in my apartment staring at my phone, waiting for the fallout. It came, but not in the form I expected. The next morning, I arrived to find Rebecca already in Linda's office, the door closed, voices raised enough to hear tone, if not words. I sat at my desk, opened my email, and tried to pretend everything was normal. An hour later, Rebecca emerged. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. She walked past my desk without looking at me, grabbed her bag, and left. Linda appeared in her office doorway. My office, now. I followed her in, my heart hammering. She had my documentation printed and spread across her desk, covered in sticky notes and highlighter marks. I've been going through this all morning, she said, cross-referencing it with project files, client communications, performance reviews. Do you know what I found? I shook my head. You've been carrying this department for 3 years, and we've been punishing you for it. She pulled out a folder, the same type I'd later see in that HR meeting. Every time one of these projects had issues, the incident reports blamed coordination failures, process breakdowns, team miscommunication. Your name appears in every single one as being responsible for the coordination aspects that failed. Do you know why? Because I was the one who fixed them, I said. Exactly. You were visible in the cleanup, so people assumed you'd caused the problem in the first place. Rebecca was smart. She stayed away from the disaster recovery, let you handle it, and never corrected anyone's assumption about who'd made the initial error. Linda sat back in her chair. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Why did you let this go on so long? I thought about that. Really thought about it. At first, I thought I was being helpful, being a good colleague. Then it became normal, expected. And by the time I realized how bad it had gotten, I felt trapped. If I stopped covering for her, projects would fail, clients would suffer, the company would lose money. It felt like I'd built a house of cards, and I was the only thing holding it up. That's not your job, Linda said quietly. Your job is to manage your own projects competently, not to be a safety net for someone who's incompetent at theirs. The word hung in the air. Incompetent. I'd never let myself think it that directly. I'm putting Rebecca on a performance improvement plan, Linda continued. Effective immediately. She'll be reassigned to smaller projects with direct oversight. Her major clients are being redistributed, most of them to you, if you want them. What if I don't? I asked. Linda smiled, the first genuine one I'd seen from her. Then we hire someone competent to handle them. That's how it's supposed to work. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years, but also uneasy. This felt too easy, too clean. I'd underestimated how deeply Rebecca had woven herself into the company's ecosystem. I'd also underestimated how far she'd go to protect her position. The first sign came that afternoon, a company-wide email from our IT department about proper data security protocols. Standard stuff, except for one line. Recent audits have revealed several instances of unauthorized access to project files. Please ensure you're only accessing files for projects you're actively assigned to. I read it 3 times, my blood going cold. I'd accessed Rebecca's project files regularly for 3 years, with her knowledge, with her explicit requests, but I'd never thought to get those requests in writing, to create a paper trail proving I had permission. If someone wanted to twist that narrative, make it look like I was snooping, interfering, maybe even sabotaging. My phone buzzed. A text from a coworker in finance. Dude, did you hear? Rebecca's claiming you've been hacking her projects. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. I called Linda immediately. She picked up on the first ring. I saw the IT email, I said. This is about me, isn't it? It's about covering our asses, Linda said bluntly. Rebecca went to IT this morning, filed a complaint that you've been inappropriately accessing her files. IT pulled the logs, saw you've been in her project folders regularly. I explained the context, showed them your documentation, but they're required to investigate any security complaint. She asked me to review her files, I said, hearing the edge of panic in my voice. I have text messages, Do you have her explicitly giving you permission in writing? Email? Formal documentation? I closed my eyes. Most of it was verbal, or texts that just said, "Can you check something for me?" without specifying what. Linda swore softly. That's what I thought. Look, I believe you. The evidence supports you. But this is going to get messy before it gets better. IT has to complete their investigation. HR needs to get involved because there's now a formal complaint. Do not delete anything. Do not talk to Rebecca. Document every interaction from here on out. She's setting me up, I said. She's covering her tracks, making it look like I'm the problem. I know, Linda said. And we're going to prove otherwise. But you need to be smart about this. No more fixing things quietly. No more being the invisible hero. Everything by the book from now on. I hung up and sat at my desk, looking at my computer screen without seeing it. 3 years of helping someone, and it had turned into ammunition against me. The IT investigation took a week. 7 days of walking into the office not knowing if I'd be suspended, fired, or arrested for corporate espionage. 7 days of Rebecca avoiding me completely, of co-workers giving me strange looks, of whispered conversations that stopped when I walked past. The IT department's final report cleared me of any malicious intent, but it documented every file access, every login, every timestamp. And because I couldn't prove explicit permission for most of it, the report concluded with a recommendation for additional oversight and documentation protocols for cross-project collaboration. Corporate speak for, we believe you, but we can't prove you weren't doing something wrong. Rebecca used that ambiguity like a weapon. I started hearing rumors that I'd been sabotaging her projects to make myself look good, that I'd been stealing her ideas and presenting them as my own, that I was obsessed with her, that I'd been stalking her digitally, that I'd made her feel unsafe. None of it was true. All of it sounded plausible enough that people started treating me differently. The coffee break conversations that stopped when I approached. The meeting invites that somehow got sent to everyone except me. The way people started double-checking anything I said, like they couldn't quite trust my word anymore. I went to HR, filed my own complaint, brought my documentation, my evidence, my 3 years of paper trail. The HR rep, a woman named Angela Thornton, listened patiently, took notes, and said they'd investigate. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. I followed up. Angela said the investigation was ongoing. These things take time. They were being thorough. Another week. Then another. Meanwhile, Rebecca was back to her normal schedule, handling clients, doing presentations. She'd been pulled from the performance improvement plan Linda had mentioned. When I asked Linda why, she looked exhausted. I got overruled. Upper management reviewed the situation and decided that given the IT investigation and the HR complaints, it would be inappropriate to take action against Rebecca while things were still under review. So she makes a false complaint about me, and that protects her from consequences for her actual incompetence? That's the long and short of it, yes, Linda said. I'm sorry. I'm fighting this, but I'm getting resistance from people above my pay grade. Let me guess, I said. Rebecca has friends in upper management. Linda's expression told me everything I needed to know. I'd been so focused on doing good work, on solving problems, that I'd never bothered to build political capital. Rebecca had been there longer, knew more people, had cultivated relationships, while I'd been fixing her mistakes in the background. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I started looking for other jobs, updated my resume, reached out to recruiters, scheduled interviews. If this was how Meridian Systems treated people who actually did good work, I didn't want to be here anymore. But I also wasn't going to let Rebecca win by default. I kept doing my job, kept documenting everything, and waited for her to make a mistake I couldn't be blamed for. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks after the IT investigation cleared, the Hartley Industries project landed on Rebecca's desk. It was her first major client assignment since the Riverside disaster. Linda had fought to keep her off it, but Rebecca had gone directly to our VP, argued that she was being unfairly punished, and got herself assigned. I was deliberately kept off the project. No backup role, no file access, nothing. For the first time in 3 years, Rebecca was completely on her own. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt dread, because I knew Rebecca's patterns, her weaknesses, the ways she cut corners and made assumptions, and I knew the Hartley project was complex enough that she'd need help she wasn't going to ask for. The mistakes started showing up in week 2. Small things at first. A client meeting scheduled for the wrong time. An equipment quote that didn't match the specifications. Nothing catastrophic, but the kinds of warning signs I'd learned to recognize. I said nothing. Documented nothing. It wasn't my project. She'd made sure of that. Week 3 brought bigger problems. The equipment vendor called our office, confused about conflicting information they'd received. The office manager mentioned it in passing, assuming someone would handle it, that someone should have been Rebecca. I don't know if she did. Week 4, I heard through the office grapevine that Hartley's project manager was unhappy with communication. Rebecca had apparently missed 2 scheduled calls and hadn't returned voicemails. I kept my head down and worked on my own projects. Week 5, Linda called me into her office. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I need you to look at something," she said, pulling up the Hartley project files. "Rebecca's supposed to present the final implementation plan to the client tomorrow. I did a spot check of her documentation and..." She trailed off, turned her monitor so I could see. I recognized my own work immediately. Sections of the implementation plan had been copied directly from my previous projects. Not adapted, not modified. Copied, including project-specific details that made no sense for Hartley's needs. References to equipment they weren't using. Timelines that didn't match their schedule. Even client names from my other projects that Rebecca had failed to find and replace. "This is plagiarism," I said flatly. "This is her passing off my work as her own, badly." Linda nodded. "She's supposed to present this to Hartley's entire executive team tomorrow at 2 p.m. If she goes in there with this, we'll lose the client and probably face legal questions about our competence." "Then stop her," I said. "Pull the presentation. Tell her it needs more work." "I can't," Linda said, and I heard real frustration in her voice. "I'm not her direct supervisor on this project. That's Michael Brennan in the VP's office, and he's out of town until Monday. If I intervene, Rebecca will claim I'm continuing to target her unfairly. She's already built that narrative." "So what are you asking me?" I said, though I already knew. "I'm asking if you're willing to help her fix this. One more time, for the good of the company, to save the Hartley account." I looked at Linda, this woman who'd tried to do right by me and gotten blocked at every turn. Then I looked at the plagiarized, incompetent mess on her screen, and I made a choice I should have made 3 years ago. "No," I said. The word felt like dropping a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten what it was like to stand up straight. Linda closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "I understand. I can't say I blame you." "She made this bed," I said. "She's fought every attempt to hold her accountable. She's lied about me, tried to sabotage my career, and used me as a safety net while simultaneously claiming I was the problem. I'm done being her backup parachute." "The Hartley account," Linda started, "is not my responsibility," I finished. "It's hers. She wanted this project. She fought to get it. She got me excluded from it. Now she gets to own the results." I walked out of Linda's office, went back to my desk, and finished my work for the day. Then I went home, poured myself a drink, and waited. The next afternoon, I wasn't in the office. I'd taken a personal day, had an interview scheduled with a competitor that was going very well. My phone started buzzing around 3 p.m. Linda's name. I didn't answer. 3 more calls, 2 voicemails. Then a text. "She crashed and burned. Hartley walked out. Need to talk." I didn't respond. Didn't check my email. Didn't engage. I finished my interview, drove home, and made dinner. Whatever was happening at Meridian, whatever consequences Rebecca was finally facing, I wasn't going to be part of cleaning it up. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find an email from HR requesting my presence at 10 a.m. My stomach dropped. This was it. They were going to fire me for not helping, for letting a major client presentation fail. When I walked into that conference room, saw Linda and Gregory and those 3 manila folders, I thought I knew how this would go. They'd found a way to blame me. Somehow, Rebecca had spun this as my fault too. But then Gregory opened the folders, started reading through the incident reports, and I realized something was different. The tone was different. Linda wasn't looking at me with disappointment. She was looking at me with something that might have been respect. And when I pulled out my phone, showed them the documentation I'd been building for weeks, everything finally shifted. "Let me understand this correctly," Gregory said, scrolling through my files. "You've been covering for Rebecca Lawson's mistakes for 3 years. You've documented dozens of instances where she made critical errors, and you corrected them. And for most of that time, you were blamed for the issues rather than credited with fixing them." "That's accurate," I said. Gregory looked at Linda. "Did you know about this?" "Not until 6 weeks ago," Linda said. "When the Riverside presentation fell apart, he finally told me the full scope of it. I started my own investigation, found everything he said was true, and attempted to put Rebecca on a performance plan. I was overruled by upper management." "Why weren't we informed?" Gregory asked, and there was steel in his voice now. Linda hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Rebecca filed a complaint claiming I was unfairly targeting her. Then she filed the IT complaint about unauthorized file access. Between those two complaints, HR advised me to step back and let the investigation process play out. So she weaponized our HR process to avoid accountability, Gregory said. It wasn't a question. He turned back to me. And yesterday's Hartley presentation? I wasn't on that project, I said. Rebecca specifically requested I be excluded. Linda asked me to review the presentation materials the day before the meeting, and I declined. Why? I met his eyes. Because I was done being Rebecca's safety net. Because every time I fixed her mistakes, it enabled her to keep making them and somehow blame me for the problems. Because 3 years of being helpful had turned into 3 years of being used. Gregory was quiet for a moment, then he closed the folders. Here's what's going to happen. I'm opening a formal investigation into every incident in these files. We're going to document the full scope of performance issues, the pattern of blame shifting, and the misuse of HR processes. This investigation will be conducted by an external firm to avoid any claims of internal bias. He turned to Linda. You should have elevated this to me directly when you first discovered it. I know, Linda said. I made a judgment call that turned out to be wrong. We'll address that separately, Gregory said. Then back to me. I need you to understand something. The company owes you an apology. Multiple apologies. We failed you systemically, and in doing so, we enabled someone who was actively harmful to our operations and our reputation. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded. That said, Gregory continued, I need to ask you something difficult. Are you willing to stay while we sort this out? Or have we burned that bridge? I'd thought about this question all night. I have an offer from another company, I said honestly. It's a good offer. More money, better title, clean slate. But I've put 3 years into Meridian, and if Rebecca faces actual consequences, if the system actually works for once, I'd like to see that. Gregory smiled slightly. Fair enough. I can't make promises about timelines, but I can promise that this investigation will be thorough and fair. Can you work with that? One condition, I said. I want everything documented and transparent. No more quiet fixes, no more he said, she said. If we're doing this, we do it by the book. Agreed, Gregory said immediately. He stood, extended his hand. I shook it, still not quite believing this was happening. As I left the conference room, I saw Rebecca down the hall, being escorted into a different meeting room by 2 people I didn't recognize. She looked terrified. I felt no satisfaction in it, no sense of triumph, just exhaustion and a strange sense of relief. The external investigation took 3 weeks. They interviewed everyone who'd worked with Rebecca, pulled every project file, examined every incident report. They talked to clients, vendors, even people who'd left the company. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Rebecca's pattern of mistakes and blame shifting went back to before I'd started at Meridian. She'd burned through 2 previous office partners who'd both left the company. One of them, when contacted by the investigators, described the exact same pattern I'd experienced. Cover for her mistakes, get blamed for problems, watch her collect credit for your work. Why didn't you report it? The investigator had asked him. I did, he'd said. I was told I needed to be more of a team player. That collaboration meant supporting your colleagues. So I left instead. The investigation also uncovered something I hadn't known about. Rebecca had a relationship with someone in upper management. Not romantic, but her cousin worked as a senior director in our corporate office. That connection had shielded her from consequences, had gotten my HR complaint buried, had overruled Linda's attempt at a performance plan. The investigative firm's report was devastating. 43 pages documenting a pattern of incompetence, misconduct, and systematic manipulation of company processes to avoid accountability. They recommended immediate termination. But before that happened, there was one more meeting. HR called it a mediated conversation. Rebecca, myself, Gregory, Linda, and a mediator from the investigative firm. The goal, supposedly, was to give Rebecca a chance to respond to the findings and for both of us to share our perspectives. I almost didn't go. It felt like one more way for her to make excuses, to twist the narrative. But Linda convinced me. She's done, Linda said. This is just procedure, but I think you deserve to hear whatever she has to say. Rebecca looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. Her hands shook as she held a coffee cup. She wouldn't look at me. The mediator started with a summary of the findings, reading through the major points in a clinical, dispassionate voice. Rebecca's pattern of errors, the evidence of blame shifting, the misuse of HR processes, the relationship with upper management that had influenced decisions. When the mediator finished, there was silence. Then Rebecca spoke. I never meant for it to get this bad, she said quietly. Her voice was different. No confidence, no performance, just someone who'd been backed into a corner and knew it. When did it start? Gregory asked. Rebecca laughed, a bitter sound. Day 1. I got this job because my cousin pulled strings. I wasn't qualified. I knew it, he knew it, but he convinced them to take a chance on me. I thought I could figure it out as I went. But the projects were complicated, the systems were difficult, and I was drowning. Then David Thornton turned out to be the kind of manager who didn't look too closely as long as results happened. So I learned to hide the problems, to smooth things over, to find people who would help me fix things. People like me, I said. Rebecca finally looked at me. You were good at it. You were so good at all of this. And you actually cared about doing it right. It was easy to let you handle things. And then it became normal. Expected. I told myself I was delegating, that I was using my team effectively. But I knew. I knew it was wrong. You didn't just let me handle things, I said, keeping my voice level. You blamed me when things went wrong. You filed complaints about me to protect yourself. You tried to destroy my career to cover your incompetence. I panicked, Rebecca said. When Linda started asking questions, when you stopped covering for me, I panicked. I thought if I could make you look like the problem, maybe I could survive long enough to actually learn how to do the job properly. After 3 years, I said. You had 3 years to learn. 3 years of me showing you how to do things correctly. You didn't want to learn. You wanted someone else to carry the weight while you collected the credit. She didn't deny it. The mediator intervened. Rebecca, do you have anything else you'd like to say? Rebecca set down her coffee cup. Her hands were still shaking. I'm sorry, she said, looking at me directly. For what that's worth, which is probably nothing at this point, I'm sorry. You tried to help me, and I used you. You did excellent work, and I let you take the blame for my failures. You deserved better, and I didn't give it to you because I was too busy protecting myself. It was the first genuine thing I'd heard her say in 3 years. I waited to feel something. Vindication, maybe. Satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. Thank you for saying that, I said, but it doesn't fix the damage. I know, she said quietly. Gregory spoke up. Rebecca, we've made our decision. Your employment with Meridian Systems is terminated, effective immediately. You'll receive severance per your contract, but we'll be including documentation of the reasons for termination. I'd strongly suggest you use this as an opportunity to reassess your career path and consider whether you're in the right field. Rebecca nodded. She stood up, gathered her things, and walked out without another word. I watched her go and felt nothing but a strange sense of absence. The weight I'd been carrying was gone, but I hadn't realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being the person who fixed things. Linda touched my arm. You okay? I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me in a few months. The aftermath was complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. Meridian offered me a promotion, project director, a title bump, and a 22% raise. They also offered a formal apology, both from Gregory and from the VP, whose relationship with Rebecca had enabled the whole situation. I accepted the promotion, but turned down the raise. I don't want money for being treated badly, I told Gregory. I want proper compensation for my actual work. Evaluate my performance on its merits, then pay me accordingly. They did. 6 weeks later, after reviewing my actual project history separated from Rebecca's disasters, they offered me a 35% raise and a spot on a task force redesigning the company's project oversight processes. That, I accepted. The changes we implemented were simple but effective. Mandatory cross-training so no one person became a single point of failure. Quarterly project audits by uninvolved third parties. A formal escalation process for reporting colleague concerns that couldn't be buried by personal connections. Most importantly, we created a clear documentation trail for all collaborative work. If someone asked you to review their files, to check their work, to help with their projects, it had to be logged and acknowledged by both parties. No more quiet fixes that left the helper vulnerable to blame. The new systems wouldn't prevent all Rebeccas, but they'd make it harder for someone to manipulate the system for 3 years while destroying someone else's reputation. I stayed at Meridian for another 18 months, led several major projects successfully, built actual relationships instead of just being the guy who fixed disasters, and eventually got recruited to a senior position at a competing firm. The day I gave my notice, Linda took me to lunch. Any regrets? She asked. About Rebecca? About staying as long as you did? I thought about it. Regrets about enabling her as long as I did, yeah. I should have spoken up sooner, should have let natural consequences happen instead of always cushioning the fall. But I learned things. About boundaries, about self-respect, about the difference between being helpful and being used. What would you tell someone in a similar situation? Linda asked. Stop fixing other people's mistakes, I said immediately. I know it feels good to be the competent one, the reliable one, the person who saves the day. But if you're constantly preventing someone from facing consequences, you're not helping them. You're enabling them to keep failing and hurt more people. And if projects suffer? Then they suffer, I said. That's what consequences are supposed to do. They're supposed to hurt enough that people change their behavior. Every time I fixed Rebecca's mistakes, I removed the incentive for her to improve. I thought I was protecting the company, protecting our clients, but I was really just protecting her from reality. Linda nodded slowly. For what it's worth, the changes you helped implement have already caught 2 other people who were pulling similar stunts. Not as extreme as Rebecca, but patterns of pushing work onto others and taking credit. Good, I said. That's exactly what the systems were supposed to do. We finished lunch, and I went back to the office for my final 2 weeks. On my last day, I cleaned out my desk and found something I'd forgotten about. The gift card Rebecca had given me after I fixed the Sterling Tech disaster years ago. It had never been activated. I threw it away. My new job started the following Monday. Different company, different systems, different people. But I carried the lessons forward. When a new colleague started asking me to check her work, I helped once, then directed her to our official mentoring program. When someone tried to dump an urgent project on me that wasn't my responsibility, I said no and suggested appropriate escalation channels. Being helpful is valuable. Being a doormat is not. It took 3 years of enabling someone else's career at the expense of my own to learn the difference. The last I heard about Rebecca, she'd left the engineering consulting field entirely. Someone told me she was working in retail management. I didn't ask for details, didn't follow up. Her story wasn't my responsibility anymore. Mine barely was. 6 months into my new job, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. She introduced herself as someone who'd worked with Rebecca at her job before Meridian. "I heard what happened," she wrote. "I just wanted you to know that you weren't the first person she did this to, and I'm glad you finally stopped it. I left my career over what she put me through. I'm happy someone finally stood up to her." I stared at that message for a long time. Thought about the person Rebecca had been before, the person she'd become after. Wondered if 3 years of enabling her had somehow made things worse, had given her time to hurt more people. Then I closed LinkedIn and went back to work. Not my circus, not my monkeys, not anymore. I still think about it sometimes, usually late at night when I'm reviewing project files. I wonder what would have happened if I'd refused to fix that first mistake, if I'd let the Sterling Tech order fail and forced Rebecca to own the consequences. Would she have learned? Would she have improved? Or would she have just found someone else to exploit? I don't know. I'll never know. What I do know is this. The most expensive thing I ever did was work for free. Not in terms of time or effort, but in terms of self-respect, career advancement, and 3 years of my professional life spent being someone else's backup plan. When people ask me now for career advice, especially junior colleagues just starting out, I tell them what I wish someone had told me. Help people, absolutely. Be generous with your knowledge and your time. But the moment you notice a pattern where someone consistently needs your help with basic aspects of their job, where they never improve despite your assistance, where you're working harder to maintain their career than they are, that's when you step back. That's when you let them fall. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them from themselves. And the kindest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I learned that lesson the hard way. 3 years hard. But I learned it. And I've never forgotten it. If you made it this far, hit like. You've earned it. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.